Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
Decision-making can be described as the process of choosing one option or course of action over another. Many decisions are straightforward, like deciding what to eat for dinner or which shirt to wear in the morning. However, some choices are life-altering and have the potential to shape our future in profound ways. It is precisely this kind of decision that I now face, and I must admit I am deeply afraid of making the wrong choice. My dilemma stems from the fact that my ex-girlfriend, Vanessa, wants us to get back together. We broke up in high school, and since then, I can't recall a single day where I've truly felt happy. The breakup was her doing. She broke my heart. While I genuinely believe she wouldn't hurt me again, the fear of being wrong is overwhelming. Let me introduce myself. My name is Samuel Daniel Carter, though most people call me Sam. My parents do too, unless they're upset with me. To explain how I ended up in this situation, I need to take you back a few decades to my childhood. I was labeled a child prodigy early on, gifted with an innate mechanical aptitude. I could understand the inner workings of almost anything. Hand me a broken object, and I'd have it repaired and functioning before most people could even identify the problem. My father was a high-ranking corporate administrator who climbed the ladder to secure a corner office, his own parking spot, and access to the executive washroom. While my dad made more than enough to support the three of us, my mom decided to return to work when my uncle, her brother, ran into trouble at his auto shop. He had to let go of an employee, leaving him short-staffed and in desperate need of a reliable front desk receptionist. My mom agreed to step in, but only on the condition that she could bring me along, as I was just 4 years old at the time. Initially, everyone worried I'd become bored or disruptive at the shop, but they agreed to give it a try. My parents even brought along some quiet toys to keep me occupied. Predictably, the toys didn't hold my attention for long, and I began exploring the shop, searching for something more engaging. That's when I discovered my uncle's collection of automotive repair manuals. Thanks to my mom, I learned to read at an early age, and as I flipped through the colorful illustrations in those manuals, I found they actually made sense to me. At first, my mom probably assumed I was just looking at the pictures, but as long as I stayed quiet and didn't damage the books, no one minded. So I kept reading. I spent hours each day poring over those manuals, learning everything I could about auto repair. Many of the books were incredibly detailed, teaching me not only about car components and their functions but also about the tools required to work on different types of vehicles. My secret came to light one day when Marcus, one of my uncle's mechanics, came into the office to check the ignition timing for a car he was working on. Without thinking, I blurted out the answer, 1 degree over top dead center. Marcus was stunned, not just by the fact that I understood the question, but by the fact that I was right. When he looked it up in the book to confirm, his shock turned to excitement. He spent the next 10 minutes testing me with questions about car repair, growing more impressed as I rattled off correct answers. My uncle, curious about what was taking so long, came to investigate. By the time my mom returned from the restroom, she found both men taking turns quizzing me, trying to stump me with increasingly difficult questions, and failing every time. At the time, I didn't fully understand why they were so amazed. To me, it was just a fun game, but seeing how excited these grown men were made me feel proud. It was the beginning of a journey that would shape not only my skills but my entire life. From that moment on, my uncle took a more active role in my development, even going as far as to take me out to the shop when it wasn't busy to teach me firsthand about the things I'd been studying in his books. It became clear early on that I not only had some type of gift when it came to anything mechanical, but I was actually learning from what I was reading and not just memorizing words out of a magazine. My Uncle Robert started out having me describe how to do different repair jobs and then gradually moved up to having me attempt them on my own. He, of course, was always right by my side to supervise. Although not being anywhere near as strong as my uncle was a hindrance, I seemed to perform remarkably well given my small size and, of course, my age. As time went on, my uncle would allow me to do some things that did not require certification on my own. If I needed any help, all I had to do was ask one of his employees for assistance. Usually, this was only done when I wasn't strong enough to twist something loose or tighten it back up again properly. At first, My uncle's workers seemed annoyed by my presence, but it wasn't too long before they became amazed by my abilities and welcomed me into their fold, although they did have to tone down their profanity quite a bit. I was occasionally privy to my share of adult content. Uncle Robert started me on my first set of tools that Christmas, and from then on, they became my toys of preference. I'd go with Mom and help Uncle Robert out in the shop until it was finally time for me to start school. I hated not being able to work in the shop all day, but some of my classes were fun, and it seemed nice to be able to interact with my peers. At least it did at first, anyway. It quickly became apparent that although I excelled in reading comprehension and anything mechanical, being surrounded by grown-ups all day long had affected my ability to socialize with kids my own age. I did great in some classes and well enough in others, but I quickly earned the reputation of being a loner, having next to nothing in common with any of my classmates besides the bookwork. During the next few years, my interest expanded beyond mere automotive repair to anything mechanical. I could now fix just about anything electrical, from VCRs and DVD players to toasters and garage door openers. I was even good at building computers, though I didn't know how to run them very well after they were put together. When I turned 8, I was once again looking forward to working in the shop over the summer. But my uncle had other ideas and convinced my parents to let him enter me into an automotive certification class hosted by a local junior college. Of course, he had to get special permission from the instructor due to my young age. At first, the guy assumed that my uncle was joking, but upon discovering that he was serious about getting me enrolled in the program, Professor Adams told him that he wasn't going to waste a class seat on a kid who was probably barely able to change motor oil. Uncle Robert challenged the professor to test me on my knowledge of automotive repair, and when he refused, saying it was a waste of his time, my uncle decided to get a bit creative. "I have $100 here that says Sam can pass any entrance examination you come up with," my uncle challenged. "I'm not going to bet on this child's inability to pass my prerequisite test," Professor Adams responded. "What's wrong, Doc? Afraid you'll lose? I'll even make it easy on you. If Sam fails your test, you can keep the money and never have to hear from us again. But if he passes, I get my $100 back and you sign the waiver to accept him into this program. Either way, you stand to lose nothing," my uncle said. "All right, Mr. Carter, it's your money," the professor said with an arrogant chuckle. "And I intend to keep it that way," my uncle replied with a grin on his face. As you can probably imagine, I was not overly thrilled by this turn of events, as the instructor for this course clearly did not want me in his class. My uncle calmed me down by telling me to just do my best and not to be concerned about the outcome. The entrance exam actually went really well. The professor started off easy, thinking he could stump me early on. When that didn't work, he moved to the more advanced subject matters. By the time we had finished with the test, he was throwing things at me that were beyond what his class was meant to teach. I knew this because I had already read the course book. When it was all said and done, I had to attend class on both Tuesdays and Thursdays while my uncle got his $100 back. Something didn't seem quite fair if you asked me. For the next couple of years, summers seemed to take on the same pattern, with my uncle using his little $100 bill trick until people started recognizing my name when I would enroll for a class. After that, the professors would usually just sign the waiver without provocation. It was about a week before Christmas, and my mom and I were coming back from the mall when we noticed a car stalled on the side of the road with what appeared to be a woman and a little girl, who looked to be about my age, still sitting inside. Mom pulled over, and before she could stop me, I jumped out of the car and went over to ask the lady if she needed any help. That was when I recognized the girl sitting beside her. It was Vanessa Clark. Vanessa was in a few of my classes at school, and although we weren't exactly friends, seeing that I really didn't have any my own age, she was always nice to me. Vanessa didn't have any real friends either, but it was for a totally different reason. Her dad skipped out on her mother when she got pregnant, leaving Vanessa's mom to be the sole provider for the family. She worked hard in her job as an office assistant, but it didn't pay all that much. I knew all of this because I accidentally overheard Vanessa explaining it to one of the teachers one day when she didn't have enough money to buy school pictures like the rest of us did. I always felt bad for Vanessa after that, but I didn't want to tell her what I had heard and possibly make her feel worse. "Excuse me, ma'am, but what seems to be the problem?" I asked while knocking on the window. "Oh, the car just started sputtering, and then it died," I'm hoping that if I just give it a few minutes, it will start back up again. Vanessa's mom replied. Why don't you pop the hood and let me take a look at the engine? I asked. I'm sorry, son, but I don't really think there is much you can do, she said, slightly amused at my request. I am a certified general mechanic, I told her proudly. You really shouldn't tell fibs, little boy, she said to me in a slightly annoyed tone of voice. He is telling you the truth, ma'am, my mother said as she walked toward their car. Sam is a genius when it comes to anything mechanical, she added. I believe the term they used at the university was child prodigy. Mom, I said, hating to be referred to as a genius. That is unbelievable, Vanessa's mom stated. He's not lying, Mom. Sam is in some of my classes in school, and I overheard a few of the teachers saying the same thing Vanessa told her, having finally recognized who I was. With my identity now verified, at least by her own daughter, Vanessa's mom reluctantly popped the hood as I began to diagnose her problem. After once again failing to get it started, I recognized that the old model of Nissan she was driving had a corroded vacuum hose. After sealing it with electrical tape, I took a rag and held it tightly over the tailpipe. This created enough suction that it freed the hose of excess air, allowing the engine to start, even though it was clearly not in the best of shape. I can't believe you got it started. How much do I owe you? She asked nervously. Oh, there is no charge for this, but it is only a temporary fix at best. You really should drop by the shop tomorrow and let me work on it some more, I suggested, handing her one of my business cards that my uncle made up for me. I'd like to, but with the holidays coming up, I really just don't have the money right now, she confessed. Look, because of the child labor laws, I am not really supposed to work tomorrow anyway. Stop by the shop in the morning around 10 a.m., and I will only charge you for whatever parts you need, I told her. I couldn't let you do that, she started to protest. Sure you could, I replied. Just think of it as an early Christmas gift to Vanessa. I wouldn't want her or her mother to get stranded someplace because of something I could easily fix, I said. Wouldn't your uncle get upset that you were working on cars for free? Vanessa's mom asked. No. As long as we're not busy and the mechanic is working off the clock, my uncle lets his employees bring in cars to work on all the time for various reasons. I know he wouldn't have a problem with me doing this, I told her. I still don't think I should let you do this for us for free, Vanessa's mother said. Okay, how about you bake me some of your oatmeal chocolate chip cookies? I suggested. Vanessa had brought some into class for Halloween one year, and they were some of the best I'd ever tasted. I suppose I could do that, she agreed reluctantly. Great, then I will see the two of you tomorrow. Bye, Vanessa, I said, waving my hand at her. Goodbye, Sam. And thank you, she said meekly. You're welcome, I replied as they started to drive away. Why did you do that? My mom asked me after we were back in our car. Mom, Vanessa's mother doesn't have much money. I overheard her telling one of the teachers at school that she couldn't afford to have her picture taken because her father left them before Vanessa was born and her mother's job just doesn't pay very well. Uncle Robert has a big heart, and I know that he won't have a problem with me doing this for them, I replied. That's very nice of you, but if I didn't know any better, I would say that you have a little crush on Vanessa, Mom teased. Oh, come on, Mom. I feel bad for her, that's all. Some of the kids at school found out that Vanessa's mother buys her clothing from the thrift store, and now a lot of them make fun of her for wearing used clothes, I told her. That's terrible, she remarked. Kids can be cruel, Mom. Especially if you're different, I said, reflecting on some of my own personal experiences. Are we still talking about Vanessa, or is that how they treat you as well? Mom asked insightfully. I don't want to talk about it, I replied honestly. Okay. But if you ever do feel like talking, I am always ready to listen, she said lovingly. Thanks, Mom, I said, ending our conversation. As I had predicted, after I explained some of the hardships they had been through, my uncle didn't have a problem with me helping out Vanessa and her mother. So, around 10 a.m., an old, rickety car pulled into the shop with Mrs. Clark behind the wheel and Vanessa riding shotgun. As she had promised, Vanessa's mother, who I found out was named Linda, had baked a fresh batch of her famous oatmeal chocolate chip cookies, which I made sure to share with Vanessa, earning me a bright smile for my troubles. Vanessa sat out in the shop and talked with me while I worked on her mother's car. I had been a loner for so long that it was actually nice to carry on a conversation with someone my own age, even if it wasn't about anything mechanical. My uncle had a policy of only selling new or factory-built parts, yet he had a collection of used materials in his warehouse for us to use in case someone couldn't afford to pay. Uncle Robert saw this act of charity as a way to give back to the community, which had afforded him a good living all these years. I ended up using several of those parts on Vanessa's mother's vehicle, and when I was finished, the grand total for the new materials came to just $12.75. Vanessa's mother was ecstatic, which was something I got the feeling Vanessa didn't see a lot of at home. My diligent hard labor earned me another of those fabulous smiles that I, for some reason, suddenly seemed to enjoy getting. After Vanessa and her mother left in a car that was considerably more reliable than when they came in, my uncle started to tease me about having a girlfriend. Of course, I strictly denied the accusation, but in the back of my mind, I started to wonder if just maybe he was right. And if so, would that really be such a bad thing? Because of my little Christmas present, Vanessa and I started talking to each other more at school, and suddenly, it didn't seem quite as depressing as it had once been. Vanessa's birthday, which coincidentally coincided with Valentine's Day, fell on a Saturday that year. For a present, she had received 3 tickets to Ocean View Amusement Park from her aunt, who sent them by mail because she and her husband had plans to celebrate that night and were not able to visit her in person. Since we lived in a relatively warm climate, the park was already open for business. I was shocked to get the invitation to accompany them to the park and initially asked if it was Vanessa's mother's idea to take me as payment for the work I had done on her car. Vanessa assured me that it was her idea to invite me, but her mother did feel it was a nice gesture after she made the suggestion. After receiving permission from my parents, I did something I rarely ever did and took a day off from work at my uncle's garage to go with Vanessa and her mother to the park. All Vanessa could talk about on the way, there was a new coaster she had heard about called the Hurricane. It was supposed to be one of the most thrilling rides ever designed, and I was looking forward to going on it myself. I loved roller coasters and, being mechanically minded, was fascinated by their design. I actually knew quite a bit about this particular ride, having researched it for a report I wrote on the mechanics of roller coasters in one of my summer college classes. I couldn't wait to see it in action. As we were anxiously waiting in line for our turn to challenge this mighty hunk of steel, suddenly, there was a loud noise, and the train stopped moving. About 5 minutes later, I saw a man who I recognized as Henry Oceanview, the owner of the park, talking to a guy in a hard hat. Neither of the men seemed particularly happy at that moment. I asked Vanessa to hold my place in line while I went up to greet them. I overheard the man in the hard hat, who I assumed was one of the engineers of the ride, say that the linear induction motor they had recently installed was defective and that they wouldn't be able to get a replacement for it until at least Tuesday afternoon. Mr. Oceanview was livid. "Do you realize that a representative from Travel Monthly is coming here today to do a feature story on this ride? Isn't there anything you can do to get it up and running again?" Mr. Oceanview asked. "I'm sorry, but not without a working linear induction motor, and we don't have one," the guy said. Poor Vanessa had started to tear up when she found out that the coaster she so badly wanted to ride was having technical difficulties. And now this news would crush her. Since I wanted to prevent her from shedding any more tears, I did something I rarely ever did when I was not working. I confronted the men with my so-called genius abilities. "Excuse me, Mr. Oceanview," I started to say. "What is it, son? Are you lost or something?" the man asked. "No, sir. But I couldn't help overhearing your discussion," I said. "Eavesdropping isn't a very nice thing to do, son. But I'm afraid what you heard was true. The hurricane is shut down until further notice," he said. "Actually, sir, I think I may have a solution to your problem," I told him. "And just what might that be?" he asked with a chuckle. "Why don't you switch out the linear induction motor with the one in the Riptide? It uses the same part number and is a much less popular ride," I suggested. "I'm sorry, son, but our coasters do not use interchangeable parts," Mr. Oceanview explained. "Actually, Henry, in this case, the kid is right. I don't know why I didn't think of it before. We could close down the Riptide and have the hurricane operational again in about the next 45 minutes, I said, finishing his sentence. "Yes. How did you know that?" the guy asked. I wrote a report about the mechanics of roller coasters for one of my summer college classes. I answered truthfully. Sure, kid. What are you, like 12 years old? The engineer asked. 10, actually, I replied. Oh, there you are, Sam. You really shouldn't wander off like that. I was worried sick, Linda said. I'm sorry, ma'am. It won't happen again, I said, apologizing. Are you this boy's mother? Mr. Oceanview asked. No, Sam and my daughter are friends, and she invited him to come with us today to help her celebrate. You see, today is my daughter's birthday, and she received some tickets to the park from her aunt as a gift, Vanessa's mother explained. Sam has been telling us that he attends college, Mr. Oceanview told her. Oh, he does, during the summer. You see, Sam is a child prodigy with anything mechanical. The rest of the time, he attends normal classes with my daughter, she explained. That's amazing, Mr. Oceanview exclaimed. Excuse me, sir, but shouldn't somebody get working on the rides? I reminded them. Oh, sorry. I mean, shoot, the engineer said, holding his hand to his mouth, obviously embarrassed that he had cursed in front of us. Don't worry about it, man. I hear much rougher language working in my uncle's garage, I told him. You work in your uncle's garage too? Mr. Oceanview asked. Yes. I am a certified general mechanic, I told him, after getting the okay to switch out the linear induction motor from Mr. Oceanview. Tony, the head engineer I was talking to, had his team begin to disassemble both rides so that they could swap out the parts. Would you and your friend please come with me, son? Mr. Oceanview asked. Well, sir, Vanessa and I really wanted to ride the Hurricane once it's running again, and we don't really want to lose our spot in line. It's a rather long wait, I explained. Don't worry about that, son. I will personally see to it that you and your friend get to ride anything you want as much as your heart desires, Mr. Oceanview said. Vanessa, her mother Linda, and I followed Mr. Oceanview into a private employee-only section of the park. There, he had a member of his staff take down our names and information before presenting us with an electronic line eliminator device that let us move to the beginning of any line in the park. This was the deluxe model, given only to VIPs, allowing us to ride any attraction as many times as we wanted for as long as we wished to do so. Mr. Oceanview told us that the only stipulation was that we could only take front row seats twice in a row in any half-hour period, as it would be unfair to the other patrons for someone to hog the front row seats indefinitely. Mr. Oceanview also indicated that he had a surprise for us when we were ready to turn in our passes that evening. Of course, Vanessa was ecstatic to be getting the royal treatment on her birthday outing. They had the Hurricane operational again within the hour. Personally, I think I could have done it faster, but I decided not to mention that fact to anyone, as I had bragged enough for one day. Vanessa made a beeline to the Hurricane, and as I expected, she wanted to ride in the front row. The young lady sitting next to me was contagiously happy, as the joy she was experiencing radiated off her body and onto mine, leaving us both with matching grins. I had pointed out to Vanessa earlier where high-speed cameras would snap our picture during the ride's climax and then try to sell us the photos later. Of course, I used a different word other than climax while giving my explanation. Vanessa surprised me. When we came to this point, instead of waving into the camera, she leaned over and gave me a kiss on the cheek, forever sealing that moment in time where my heart and hers bonded into a perfect union. I fell in love with Vanessa that day, and when the ride was over, I went over and purchased each of us a copy of that photograph. Since I hadn't gotten Vanessa anything for her birthday, because I wasn't aware of when it was, I made a point of buying her various mementos of our day together. I wanted my friend to have a day she would never forget, and I think I was achieving that very goal. Vanessa's mom could never afford to waste money on things like giant stuffed animals and overpriced amusement park food. I made pretty good money working for my uncle, and I couldn't think of a better use for it than making Vanessa happy. At one point, Vanessa's mom pulled me aside and said I was going overboard with my spending. After explaining to her my reasoning for it, I received a second kiss on the cheek from a beautiful woman that day, this time from her mother. Mr. Oceanview was not lying when he said he had a surprise for us when we turned in the VIP device at the end of our visit. He had upgraded our one-day tickets into season passes, allowing us to come back any time during the year for free. We were all tired from our antics at the park, but no one more so than Vanessa. It had been an emotional day for her. She fell asleep snuggled up against me on our way home. From that day on, my friendship with Vanessa intensified. I took to calling her Ness, which was something she wouldn't let anyone else get away with but seemed to prefer it from me. More of my free time was spent with either me over at her house or Ness here at mine. Although I would never say it out loud, Ness's mom was a much better cook than my own. I ate several meals at her place and thoroughly enjoyed each of them. Since I knew that Ness's mom didn't make much money, I would do odd jobs while I was visiting her and fix anything mechanical they had broken. I figured I more than made up for what I ate, as I must have saved her thousands of dollars in repair costs throughout the years. When I was 15, I talked my parents into allowing me to buy a car. I wouldn't be able to drive it for another year, but this way, I could work on fixing it up in anticipation of that glorious moment. I had Ness help, or really, in all honesty, watch me rebuild the vehicle, while I showered her with dreams of what the two of us could do together once we had our own set of wheels. As we made the transition into high school, Ness developed from a cute little girl into a stunningly beautiful young woman. It was then that she started attracting the attention of some of the guys who had previously ignored her. Although she did seem to enjoy this newfound attention, Ness never encouraged any of their behavior in my presence, and we spoke often about how she was still troubled by the way these guys used to treat her. There were a few heads that turned my way as well, though I suspected that had more to do with my shiny, newly rebuilt Dodge Challenger than it did with my physical attributes. If truth be known, I did develop some well-defined muscles while dealing with heavy equipment at the shop, but I never thought my body was anything special. I always felt that any special attention I received was due to the fact that I was one of the few freshmen to have their own car. As I grew older, life seemed to just get busier as I was trying to balance my time between high school, working in my uncle's shop, my college classes in the summer, and, of course, Ness. We somehow managed to maintain our relationship, even though I never seemed to have the amount of free time that most of my peers enjoyed. Ness knew that I was working towards a future that I hoped someday to share with her. During my junior year, I ended up selling off my Challenger for a nice profit and replaced it with a used Jaguar that needed some work. Ness wasn't too thrilled about me having to devote so much time into rebuilding its engine, but the envious look she received when I drove her to school at the start of our senior year made the effort I put into restoring this beautiful hunk of automotive machinery seem like a worthy undertaking. Aside from my lack of free time, the only real subject Ness and I constantly disagreed upon was sex. Being a normal, hormonal teenager, I was ready to experience the pleasures of the flesh, while Ness had this vision of waiting until prom night. I argued that we had essentially been going together for over 8 years and that other kids our age were already doing the deed, even those who weren't half as serious about one another as Ness and I. She explained that her mother, grandmother, and even her great-grandmother had all lost their virginities on the night of their senior prom, and she was determined to continue the tradition. I suggested that we could do other things that would leave her virginity intact, but the most she would agree upon was letting me fondle her breast through her clothes. As you can imagine, I had quite the case of blue balls most of the time. I had been enrolled in junior college courses from the ripe old age of 8, so I had no problem getting larger universities to transfer my credits. Since Ness and I wanted to attend the same school, we sat down and applied for scholarships from the University of Miami, our first choice, and the local university, Florida Tech. Although Ness was an excellent student, she didn't quite fare as well as I did when it came to scholarship offers. She ended up not getting an offer from Miami but received a full ride from Florida Tech. I had offers from both schools, and although I'd already decided on attending Florida Tech to be with Ness, I still hadn't gotten around to turning down Miami. Senior prom was quickly approaching, and I was ready to make it the best, most romantic night of our lives. My tux was rented, my car was tuned up to perfection, and our hotel room was booked. I even planned on giving Ness my great-grandmother's engagement ring as a symbol of my undying commitment to her. Everything was going perfectly, until Titan Motors requested a meeting with me in Atlanta to discuss some patents that I had sent them earlier in the year. While taking one of my summer classes, I had dreamed up the idea for a more efficient pollution control device that would not only leave cleaner fuel emissions but would nearly double the average horsepower that vehicles were able to achieve from the devices in use at that time. Since my invention adhered more toward the design Titan was using, I sent them copies of my patents in hopes of striking a deal. It seemed that they were finally ready to talk. They wanted to fly me to Atlanta to meet with their top engineers and the vice president of operations for the entire U.S. branch of the corporation. This was an opportunity that I could not afford to pass up. The only fly in the ointment was that they wanted to schedule the meeting the day before our senior prom. I knew Ness would be devastated if I were forced to miss one of the most monumental nights of our lives, and attending the prom would probably be a fun event as well. It took some wheeling and dealing, but I managed to secure airline transportation that afforded me the time I needed in Atlanta to complete my talks with Titan representatives, while ensuring that I would be back in town early enough to go out with Ness. Since I knew very little about contractual law, my dad suggested that I meet up with an old friend of his from college who practiced in Atlanta and specialized in that very field. Mr. Carson insisted on tagging along with me to protect my interests, and I was sure glad he did. The guys from Titan were noticeably unhappy that I had brought an attorney to our meeting. The first thing they did was try to downplay my work, suggesting that I overestimated my findings. They should have known better than to try and pull that on someone with my mechanical background. I knew the facts and figures I sent them were, if anything, understated, and I proceeded to tear them apart by proving so. Their next course of action was to try to lowball me with a lousy contract. This is where Mr. Carson's expertise came into play. We bartered for hours, each side threatening to leave multiple times. In the end, we hashed out an agreement that we could all live with. I left with an $850,000 check in my pocket, Mr. Carson's fees covered, and future royalty payments for every vehicle equipped with my new pollution control device. I also had a guaranteed position in the engineering department of Titan's Florida branch, pending the completion of my master's degree. Mr. Carson even worked it out where I could keep a portion of the royalties of anything I helped develop while working there in the future. Life couldn't have been any sweeter. I had just deposited nearly $1 million into my bank account. There was a six-figure salaried position waiting for me upon completion of my master's degree. I had a full-ride scholarship from a very prestigious university. And best of all, I would be losing my virginity in a few short hours to the girl who, sometime in the very near future, I intended to make my wife. I was on top of the world. And quite frankly, that should have been my first clue that disaster was about to strike. I was at the airport, anxiously awaiting the arrival of the plane that would be taking me back to Florida and into the arms of my soon-to-be lover. The only problem was the damn thing never showed up. Seems it experienced some technical difficulties at its previous location and was grounded indefinitely until the problems could be resolved. Trying to book another flight was useless, as, due to the late arrival of the cancellation announcement, all seats were previously filled. With a heavy heart, I dialed Ness's number to relay the bad news. To say she was upset would be the understatement of the century. She had reservations about me flying out this close to prom to begin with. I had assured her that everything would work out fine, and now I was going back on my word and ruining her chances of continuing her family tradition. I tried to explain that this was an unforeseeable circumstance and it wasn't really my fault. Yet, she started crying and hung up on me before I got a chance to tell her of my plan to rent a car and drive back home myself. I tried calling her back, but she turned off her ringer on her cell phone, and all I got was her voicemail. Dealing with the car rental company was another fun-filled experience I would have preferred to avoid. Even though I had a perfect driving record and a major credit card, the a-holes questioned me at every turn due to my age and the fact that I had planned to travel so far with their precious vehicle. Hell, you would think I was trying to rent a Maserati instead of a Ford Fusion for all the crap they put me through. I was finally on the road by 10:30 a.m., and by my calculations, I should arrive back home just barely in time to get changed and go pick up Ness for the prom. That was when my tire blew out. I was able to steer the car safely away from traffic, but when I looked in the trunk for a spare, all I found was a donut. I knew it would not be safe to travel as far as I was planning to go on a sub-quality tire, so after changing it, I reluctantly turned the car around and headed back to the rental facility for an exchange. After arguing with the guy behind the counter, and then his immediate supervisor, I was finally given a replacement vehicle. 45 minutes later, I was once again headed toward home. The delay in my departure time caused me to be stuck in Atlanta's noon rush hour traffic, which pushed back my ETA by over 2 hours. An accident tie-up involving a jackknifed semi-truck carrying livestock to the slaughterhouse delayed me even further. By the time I finally made it back into town, the prom had already let out, and most of the people were in the process of leaving. By sheer luck, I spotted Nessa's mother's car in the school lot and figured she had borrowed it to attend the dance by herself. Finding an empty spot with a clear view of her vehicle, I decided to park and wait for her to come out, in hopes of at least being able to salvage some aspect of our special evening. When the lot was all but cleared out, I came to the conclusion that Ness must have hitched a ride to one of the after-prom parties with one of her friends. Although I didn't like the fact of her partying without me, I knew that trying to track her down would be a difficult task to accomplish. Since I was tired from driving all day, I decided to recline the seat back and take a short nap while I waited for Ness to return. I figured the noise of the vehicle dropping her off would wake me up, and I knew her mom would need her car back by tomorrow, so I didn't suspect that she'd be out too late. The sound of a car door slamming woke me up sometime in the early hours of the morning, and I looked up to see Ness stepping out of the passenger side of a vehicle owned by Jared Simmons. Jared was known as the school hound. The guy actually kept a queen-size air mattress and a battery-operated pump in the bed of his pickup truck. He told his parents it was for camping, but he told us guys that it was cheaper than having to rent a motel room. I believed the latter. Nessa's clothes looked like they had been slept in, but I quickly discovered that wasn't the case when Jared climbed into the bed of his truck and came back with what looked like a very sheer pair of black panties, which he reluctantly handed back to Ness. I saw her bend down and step into them before they briefly kissed and went their separate ways. The word crushed didn't even begin to describe what I was feeling, as I was now almost certain that Ness had given her virginity to some other guy. The fact that she chose the school sex hound to fornicate with made her betrayal hurt all the more. I was always taught that a man had to be tough and to suck it up, but in all honesty, I cried that night, knowing that things between Ness and I would never again be the same. After I had swapped out the rental car for my own, I arrived back home around 5 a.m. and crashed. I had a fitful night's sleep, as images of Ness and Jared's physical encounter haunted my dreams, turning them into vivid nightmares from which there was seemingly no escape, neither in my waking state nor in my subconscious one. It was after 1 p.m. the next afternoon before I finally managed to crawl out of bed. Even though I had slept for hours, I got very little rest. I checked my missed messages only to see that Ness had been trying to contact me for the last 3 hours. I definitely had no desire to talk to her. After relieving myself in the bathroom, I made my way downstairs to try and get something in my empty stomach. I felt physically ill after witnessing Ness's betrayal, so food was completely out of the question at this point. It was a gamble if I could even manage to keep down a lousy cup of coffee. "Did you and Vanessa have a nice time last night?" my mother asked. "I had a lousy night. If you want to know about Ness, you'll have to ask her yourself," I stated a bit bitterly. "What do you mean? Didn't the two of you go to prom together?" she asked. "No, I didn't make it back from Atlanta in time to attend," I replied. "Oh, that's terrible. I'll bet Vanessa was really upset that the two of you weren't able to go," Mom said. "You could say that," I told her. "So, I take it you'll be going over to her house to apologize today?" Mom teased. "When hell freezes over," I blurted out. "What did you say?" Mom asked in a shocked tone of voice. "You heard me. I'll apologize to Vanessa when hell freezes over," I exclaimed. "What's going on with the two of you?" Mom asked. "I don't want to talk about it. And if she happens to call here, I don't want to talk to her either," I answered in a huff. I headed back upstairs to get cleaned up before going to the shop. My uncle's rule was that he may have a staff full of grease monkeys, but that didn't mean we could dress like slobs. I worked myself into exhaustion that evening, desperately trying to ascertain a few precious moments where my mind wasn't plagued by my problems with Ness. I reluctantly headed back home that evening, only to find her waiting for me in the driveway. Every instinct I had told me to just drive on by, but I had one nagging question that needed to be answered before I could completely cut Ness out of my life for good. That still didn't mean that I wanted to talk to her, though. "Why are you here, Vanessa?" I asked in a disgusted tone of voice. "I got your messages," she said. "Oh, you mean the ones I left after you hung up on me?" I asked. "Yeah. Did you really drive all the way here in a rented car?" she asked. "Yes. I answered. When did you get back? She asked, a bit nervously. Around 11:30 last night. Prom had already let out, but I did see your mother's car parked in the lot. You weren't anywhere to be found, I replied, wanting to see what she would say. Oh, I left the dance with a friend, she said, hoping I wouldn't question her any further. Really? Would that be the same friend who drove you back to your car this morning? The one who had to crawl in the bed of his pickup truck to retrieve your panties? I asked gruffly. Who told you that? She wanted to know. Two very reliable sources, my right eye and my left one. They both confirmed that it was you getting out of the passenger side of Jared Simmons's vehicle around 4 a.m. this morning. I guess you were just too busy getting dressed to notice that my rental car was parked just 2 rows behind you. We were supposed to give our virginities to each other last night. I still have mine. Can you say the same thing? I challenged. When she refused to look me in the eye, I had my answer. I have just one last question for you, Vanessa, and you had better not lie to me. Were you a willing participant last night? Or did Jared force you to have sex with him? I wanted to know. I was a little drunk, but no, he didn't force me. I am so sorry, Sam. I honestly never meant for any of this to happen, she exclaimed through the tears in her eyes. Go home, Vanessa. There is nothing here for you anymore, I said as I walked past her into the house, locking the door behind me. I went upstairs to bed, leaving Ness sobbing on the front step. It wasn't 10 minutes later that my mother burst into my room, demanding to know what I had done to Vanessa. I told her we had broken up and that I was refusing to discuss the reason why. Of course, we argued about it for several minutes before I said that I was very tired and needed to get some sleep. All right, but we are going to talk about this in the morning, my mother warned. No, Mom, we won't, I said, leaving no doubt in her mind that I meant what I was saying. Since I was convinced that Ness was no longer a part of my future, I wasn't tied down to attending Florida Tech. So, the next morning, I made a call to the Dean of Admissions at the University of Miami to inform them that I was graciously accepting their offer of a full scholarship. I mentioned my desire to attend summer classes as well, and we worked out a deal where I would be leaving for Miami the day after my graduation ceremony. I figured that my only chance of getting over Ness was if I wasn't seeing her on a daily basis, and by attending Miami, I knew that wouldn't be happening. I hated the thought of leaving my job at my uncle's shop, but this was the university that I originally wanted to attend, and the only reason I was willing to apply to Florida Tech was because of Ness. My parents always loved Ness, and since I didn't want to tarnish their opinion of her by revealing the cause of our breakup, it was I who became the bad guy. Mom pushed relentlessly, trying to get me to discuss my problems with Ness, and it wasn't until I threatened to leave for Miami early and miss graduation that she relented and backed off. I'm sure she could tell from my expression that I would have done IT at a T-school. I avoided Ness but stalked Jared. That a-hole was going to pay. I had no delusions about Ness being the one who truly betrayed me, but Jared knew she was my girl and still went after her, preying on a weak moment. I was not about to let him off the hook for it. Through a bit of eavesdropping, I learned that his favorite spot to take a date was Moonlight Ridge, a secluded area at the top of a rather steep incline overlooking the ocean. He boasted that the romantic setting was the perfect aphrodisiac to ensure a night of lovemaking. I found out that Jared had a hot date scheduled for Friday night and, unsurprisingly, it was with another guy's girlfriend. Having a vague idea of what I was planning to do, I borrowed one of the cars we were working on at the shop and drove it out to the rendezvous point with my bag of accessories on the seat next to me. By the time I arrived, the action had already begun. Jared's truck had a camper shell on it, complete with closable curtains, so that he could prevent people from spying on him and his lady friends. Unfortunately for him, this also prevented being able to see out of the windows as well. Donning a pair of work gloves, I crept up to the driver's side of his vehicle and, carefully as I could, put his stick-shift truck into neutral. Next, I released the parking brake and, with all my might, pushed the truck forward until it started to roll down the hill toward the water, rapidly gaining momentum along the way. By the time they realized the truck was moving, it was too late to prevent its collision with the ocean. Of course, not wanting anyone's death on my conscience, I stuck around to make sure they both escaped the truck before quietly returning to my borrowed vehicle and heading back to the shop. On my way back, I took a prepaid burner phone I had recently purchased and used it to text the number of a cop I knew would be on duty that night. All of the police in our area took their cars to my uncle's shop for repairs, so I was friends with and had the personal numbers of nearly everyone on the force. By texting from a burner phone, I could pretend to be a disgruntled senior citizen who discovered teenagers skinny dipping in a restricted area. The only downside to my plan was that I wouldn't be able to watch as the police confronted Jared and his lady friend. That would have been far too risky to attempt. My plan turned out better than I could have possibly imagined. Jared's parents had already heard rumors flying about his rolling motel. He had assured them it was just a joke made up by the guys at school and had no merit. After they had to bring a fresh set of clothes to the police station and had to face the angry parents of the girl he was with, Jared's mom and dad no longer had any doubts as to the validity of the rumors they had heard. Since there was no proof to the contrary, the entire incident was ruled an accident. Therefore, the insurance company did pay up, but Jared's parents refused to replace his rolling motel, forcing him to break out his old bicycle from storage. No one, including Jared, remotely suspected that I had anything to do with his misfortune. But the look Ness gave me the following day at school told me that she knew I was the one responsible. Graduation day was not how I had pictured it to be, as I no longer felt like I had anything to celebrate. I forced my parents into downgrading the party they had planned into a quiet family dinner at home. Ness came up and wished me good luck. I returned the sentiment, but when she went to hug me, I refused, causing her to run out of the room crying. Since neither Ness nor I had revealed what caused our breakup to anyone, I was again looked upon as the bad guy because I refused to let Ness touch me. This put an even bigger damper on what was supposed to be one of the most memorable days of my life. I settled into my new life in Miami, and although I still suffered from a heavy heart, the workload allowed me to focus on something other than my failed love life. For the first time, I started to make friends with people my own age, other than Ness, and although it wasn't the same as having a girlfriend, it was still a welcome change from what I had previously experienced. One afternoon, I was returning to my dorm room and stopped to knock, suspecting that my friend Aaron might be in there changing. Aaron liked to dress in a certain manner that really wasn't appropriate attire for the classroom. No one in our group had a problem with her clothing preferences, but since her dorm room was on the other side of campus, and we had all planned on going out that evening, I offered to let her store a bag of clothes in my room so she wouldn't have to go back to hers to change. What I found waiting for me upon entering my dorm room was Aaron alongside my very angry-looking mother. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I asked, shocked that she had come all this way just to see me, without giving me any advanced warning. "I need to talk to you in private if you don't mind," she said, glaring at Aaron. "Aaron, it looks like something has come up. Please give my regards to the rest of our group," I said. "Sure thing, hon. If you get done early, you know where to meet us. Good luck." She smirked as she slapped me on the butt and walked out. "It was nice meeting you, Mrs. Kane. Hope to see you again sometime," Aaron said before leaving. "Is that what you gave up Vanessa for?" my mom asked. "A common floozy?" "Aaron is not a floozy. I admit she dresses provocatively, and she is a hopeless flirt. But so is her life partner, Lisa," I told her. "They both love to tease and shock people, but they are very devoted to one another and would never cheat." "You mean that girl is a—" Mom trailed off. "Yes, Mom. She's not straight, and I'm not concerned about her sexual preference. Only that Aaron and Lisa have both become very good friends of mine while I've been here." "So, is that why she was changing in your room when I got here?" Mom asked. "Her dorm is all the way across campus. She always dresses more conservatively for class, and I told her she could change in here because we were all planning on going out tonight," I explained. "And just how many times have you been out with them?" my mother questioned. "A few," I admitted. "Did you come all this way to grill me on my relationship with Aaron and Lisa?" I asked, growing tired of her accusations. "No. Actually, I came to talk about Vanessa," Mom answered. "Mom, can't you give it a rest? Ness and I are over. You need to learn to accept that," I told her. "Vanessa's pregnant," Mom blurted out. "Wow. I exclaimed as the reality of the situation came back to take another stab at my already broken heart. Was I right? I asked, already knowing the answer. I came here to find out what you plan to do about it, my mom asked. What do you want me to do, Mom? Send her a card saying, "Congratulations on getting knocked up?" I asked hastily. The sound of a slap echoed through the room like a bullet as the palm of her hand made direct contact with my face. "I thought I raised you to take responsibility for your actions," she yelled. At this point, I was so pissed that I didn't think about what I was saying before I spoke. I would like to know how in the hell Ness being pregnant by some other guy is in any way my responsibility? I asked before I could stop myself. What do you mean, some other guy? You two have been together since you were 8, Sam. Mom reminded me. Did Ness tell you it was my child? I asked. No. She went to stay with her aunt, and her mother found a positive pregnancy test in her garbage while she was cleaning. She immediately called me, and I booked the first flight here, my mom explained. Knowing that the cat was already out of the bag, I decided to just come clean with Mom about everything. The reason Ness and I broke up is because I caught her cheating on me, I said. Vanessa was seeing someone else? I don't believe it, she told me. I didn't either, until I saw her step out of another guy's truck and bend over to put on her panties, I explained. We stood there in silence for a few moments, Mom obviously floored at what I had just revealed to her. Finally, after regaining her composure, she asked, "Isn't there any possibility that the child might be yours?" "No, Mom, there isn't," I answered with a glum expression. "How can you be so sure? Birth control isn't 100% effective, you know," she reminded me. "Birth control might not be, but abstinence is," I replied. "What are you talking about? You and Vanessa have been together for years. Are you trying to tell me that you have never—" She started to ask. "Done it," I said, finishing her sentence. "No, Mom. Believe it or not, we haven't. Ness had this weird hang-up about waiting until prom night to give each other our virginities. I guess it was some tradition in her family. I had everything all set to make love to her that evening, but my plane was canceled. Not wanting to miss my big night, I rented a car and tried to drive straight through. My tire had a blowout, and the only spare available was a donut. To make a long story short, it took forever to get a different vehicle and then get back on the road. With all the traffic delays I hit, I ended up not reaching the prom until after it was already over. I saw her mother's car parked in the lot, and all I could think to do was wait for Ness to come back for it. I sat there for hours until I saw Jared Simmons's truck pull up, and Vanessa got out of the passenger side. They talked for a few minutes, and then I watched Jared crawl into the bed of his truck to retrieve a pair of panties, which Ness proceeded to step into. And now she's pregnant, and I am still a damn virgin. I will tell you this much. I don't plan on staying that way for very long. I won't be stupid and get some girl pregnant, but I will not go on pining over Ness while she's having another man's kid, I said as my emotions started to overtake me. I don't know what to say, Mom admitted. Look, I chose not to tell anyone because I didn't want to soil Ness's reputation. I don't want to hurt her, but I can't have people going around thinking I abandoned my own child, I said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think you have the answers you came for. I'm going to go see if I can find something to put on my face and try to catch up with my friends, I said, emotionally drained from discussing my situation with Ness. I'm sorry that I hit you, son, Mom said, with a tear streaming down her face. I know, Mom, and I'm not really mad at you. It's just, this whole damn situation just continues to get worse, I said as I went over and hugged my mother. I probably would have come to the same conclusion that you did under the circumstances, I admitted. Mom, what am I going to do about Lauren? I know she blames me for causing this mess. I think when confronted, Ness will admit the truth, but I don't want her thinking that the baby is mine, I told her. Why don't we let Vanessa and her mother talk this out? Then, I will call Lauren afterwards and have a chat with her on your behalf. I'm sure once she hears the truth, she will be able to understand why you felt you had to leave, Mom said. So that's how we left it. I continued to advance in my classes and tried to get on with my life. I dated and, of course, lost my virginity, but I never found the special connection I once shared with a little girl who stole my heart that day at the amusement park. I decided to quit trying to find a connection with these women and concentrate my efforts on just getting laid. If truth be known, I wasn't ending up much better than Jared Simmons, though I never knowingly dated anyone who was already in a committed relationship. By the time I had completed my master's degree, I had bedded half a dozen women multiple times, and I was no happier than when I first came to Miami. Mom, Dad, and even my Uncle Ryan flew to Miami to watch me graduate. It was agreed that I would temporarily be moving back home as my new position was now waiting for me at Titan Motors. They had implemented my patents, which were now beginning to generate a rather large sum of money. Best of all, I had some updated ideas that I couldn't wait to get started on. The only reservation I had about moving back to Florida was that I was scared of bumping into Ness again. I had heard, through Mom, that she had decided to stay in the area and raise her son with the help of her mother. I never kept track of Jared and couldn't tell you if he was alive or dead. I had been working at Titan Motors for about a month when I was introduced to a very outgoing and quite attractive young woman by the name of Paige Bradley. She was a recent engineering graduate like me, only she was a bit older since she had gone back to school to get her degree. Paige was a powerhouse and not afraid to take on even the president of the company in a debate if she thought she was right. She and I first locked heads over some of my new designs, and we were still arguing an hour after everyone else had left for the day. The woman drove me completely insane, but I had to respect her, as some of her suggestions actually had merit. Mario's Pizzeria had been my favorite pizza place from as far back as I could remember. I craved the place when I was living in Miami, and now that I was back home again, I was going to indulge. After stuffing my face with some of the tastiest creations I'd had in years, I was coming out the door when I noticed a woman struggling with a basket full of clothes at the laundromat next door. It was Lauren. I rushed over to give her a hand, and she thanked me profusely as we loaded her car, the same one she had before I left, with freshly washed clothes. "It's so great to see you again, Sam. How long have you been back in town?" she asked. "I've been home just over a month now. I graduated with my master's in engineering and already had a job lined up at Titan Motors. How are you doing, Lauren? And why are you lugging clothes to the laundromat instead of washing them at home?" I asked curiously. "Sam, it was one thing for you to call me Miss Stapleton when you were 8, but now it just makes me feel old. Please call me Lauren. As for your questions, I'm doing fine, though it's a little hectic at home. Vanessa and her son Will are living with me, and having a 5-year-old running around the house can sure keep you hopping. I'm at the laundromat on a Saturday afternoon because the dryer isn't heating properly, and we haven't been able to get it fixed yet. I wash the clothes at home and bring them here to dry," she explained. "That must create quite a hassle for you. How long has it been broken?" I asked. "It's been down for about 3 weeks now. We've been meaning to get it fixed, but Vanessa's job at the restaurant is only part-time, and money has been a little tight lately," she confessed, a bit red-faced. "I could always stop over and take a look at it," I volunteered, not really sure why I was doing it. "That's sweet of you to offer, but like I said, I can't really afford a repairman right now," she reminded me. "Oh, come on, Lauren. When have I ever charged you for anything except parts when I worked on something of yours?" I asked. "It was one thing to have you helping us out when you and Vanessa were dating. Now it would feel like we were taking advantage of you," she argued. "That's just plain silly. You've always been like a second mother to me. Just because I'm no longer dating your daughter doesn't mean I don't still care about you," I protested. "I still feel like we'd be using you," she exclaimed. "Is that really the reason? Or are you still mad about what happened between me and Vanessa?" I asked, looking her straight in the eye. "Oh, heavens no. I admit I was upset with you at first, but when Vanessa explained what really happened, then it was her I was mad at. I must confess that I did express to her many times my concerns about the two of you being so exclusive from such an early age. But I never thought that she would go out and sleep with another guy while you were still dating," she explained to me. "Well, that's basically water under the bridge now. When would be the best time for me to work on your dryer, with the least amount of people underfoot?" I asked. "Are you asking when you could drop by when Vanessa won't be there?" she questioned. "Yes. I'm sorry, Lauren. I want to help you out, But I'm just not ready to face Vanessa yet, I replied honestly. She would really love to see you, Lauren told me. There's a part of me that's dying to see her again too, but it's the other side of me that I'm concerned about, I said. Vanessa leaves for work at 2 p.m. this afternoon. You could drop by any time after that, but I must warn you, I'll be babysitting. Is having William there going to be a problem for you? She asked. Not as long as you keep him away from me while I'm working, so he doesn't get hurt, I told her. Pulling up to Lauren's house was like going back in time. I started to get flashbacks of happier moments that Vanessa and I shared. When I arrived in Miami, I was lost without Vanessa. It took a lot of prodding from Aaron and Lisa before I finally broke down and told them my story. For some reason, I found it very easy to confide in them. I guess it was the fact that I felt safe. They were both hopeless flirts, but I knew that would be as far as it went. Maybe because they weren't into men, I didn't feel I had to act all macho like I did with the guys, or worry about sending out the wrong signals like I did when I was with heterosexual women. I could just be myself around them without feeling judged. I think that made all the difference. After ringing the bell, I waited at the door with my toolbox in hand for someone to answer. Lauren appeared moments later with a little blonde 5-year-old boy in tow. He reminded me so much of his mother that I actually got misty-eyed for a moment. During our introduction, I stooped down on one knee so that I was eye level with William, before offering my hand for him to shake. This seemed to put the little tyke at ease, as he bombarded me with a million questions about who I was and why I was there. Took me no time to diagnose the problem. I called a local parts store I knew to see if they had what I needed on hand. As luck would have it, they did, so I set out to do a quick parts run, returning a short time later with the items I needed to get their dryer back up and running properly again. By the time I got back, Lauren had already started preparing supper. She asked me if I would like to join them, but being still full from overindulging at lunch, I begged off. She understood, saying that they were only having hot dogs and mac and cheese anyway. She told me that if she had known in advance that I might be stopping by, she would have planned a much better meal. She did say that William had requested this particular menu. I had just finished replacing the defective part and was starting to put the dryer back together when I heard some type of commotion coming from the kitchen. A few seconds later, Lauren was screaming for help. I dropped what I was doing and raced to the kitchen, only to find William desperately gasping for breath, unable to get any air. Sam, he's choking. I tried slapping him on the back, but it didn't help, Lauren exclaimed in a panic. I quickly grabbed Will from behind and placed my hands over his abdomen, like they had shown us in the health class I had taken. Telling him to relax, I pressed my hands together and jerked his body upward in an effort to dislodge the food stuck in his throat. I had to repeat the procedure 3 times, squeezing his body harder and harder, before he finally spit up the half-eaten hot dog and began to cry. Now that I knew he was breathing again, I started to worry that I had accidentally hurt him by pressing too hard. I insist on taking him to the hospital to be checked out, I said. I'll even pay for it myself since I feel responsible. Sam, Will's healthcare is covered by the state, but I think you're right, we need to get him checked out to make sure nothing is broken or that his esophagus didn't get damaged while he was choking, she replied. The thought of something being broken had me physically ill. I would never intentionally hurt William, and I just hoped Vanessa would believe that. Lauren wanted me to drive, as she was still too shaken up over what had happened. We took her car, as it already had Will's child's seat in it. Although I did make it to the hospital safely, I wouldn't say that I complied with the posted speed limits while doing it. I immediately rushed into the ER, acting like a crazed fool, bellowing for assistance. Because William was a child, he was given priority treatment over some of the other patients. We tried to assure him that everything was going to be okay. But of course, being young and scared, the little guy wanted his mommy. Lauren had talked to Vanessa on the phone and told me that she was going to have one of her friends drop her off at the hospital, since she still couldn't afford a car of her own. I was a nervous wreck at the thought of seeing Vanessa again, but I wasn't about to leave the hospital without knowing if Will was going to be all right. So I just sucked it up and hoped for the best. Lauren and I were in the examination room with Will when Vanessa arrived. Mommy, Will said, happy to see her. Hi, honey. How are you feeling? She asked while hugging him gently. careful not to hurt him. My chest hurts a little, and my throat is sore too, he complained. Just then, the doctor came into the room with a set of x-rays in his hand. Well, folks, I have some good news. It seems little William here is free to go, he told us. So, is he going to be all right, Doc? Vanessa and I asked in unison. Yes, he replied, chuckling at our uniformity. His ribs will be a bit sore for a few days, and his throat is a little swollen, but that's to be expected. It was a lucky thing you were there, Sam, because the x-rays showed that the blockage was pretty far down in his throat. Someone not quite as strong may not have been able to pry it loose. Tell me, who taught you the Heimlich maneuver? The doctor asked. I learned it in my health class at Miami State, I replied. Well, I don't know what you do for a living, but you'd make one fine paramedic. I don't think I could have done a better job myself. The doctor praised me. Without warning, Vanessa turned and threw her arms around me, burying her head in my chest. Through her sobs, I could barely make out the words. Thank you for saving my son, she wept. My body must have been operating on autopilot, as I seemed to have no control over my arms, which instinctively reached for her. My head lowered, and I placed a soothing kiss upon her hair in a gesture of reassurance that everything was going to be okay. After all the paperwork was filed, the three of us were heading back to their house when I suddenly got an idea. I asked if they would mind if I stopped off at the convenience store on the way back to pick up something I needed. Of course, neither one of them had a problem with this, so I dashed into the shop and came back a few minutes later with all the ingredients I would need to create a special treat. What did you buy, Uncle Sam? Will asked. Now, honey, it's not nice to ask people what they bought, Vanessa said. No, that's all right, Will. I just had to go pick up your medicine. I told him with a serious look. Medicine? He replied, scrunching up his face. That's right. The doctor said that since your throat was a bit swollen, you should put something soft and cold on it. So, I bought all the makings for my world-famous milkshakes. You did say that chocolate was your favorite flavor, right? I asked, smiling. Oh boy. Thank you, Uncle Sam, he replied happily. You're welcome, kiddo, I said. How about the rest of you? Chocolate shakes all around, I asked. After receiving favorable replies from Vanessa and Lauren, I went about making a pitcher of frothy, ice-cold milkshakes, smooth enough on the throat. After the mess was cleaned up, I excused myself to finish working on their dryer. I wasn't overly happy, but not exactly surprised, when Vanessa appeared at the door. Do you mind some company? She asked. Actually, I'm just finishing up here, I replied. Do you have to rush off right away? Or could you stay and talk for a while? Vanessa wanted to know. Well, I really should be going, I said. I understand. When I heard you were back in town, I wanted to stop over to see you, but I didn't think I would be welcome. The fact that you came over to fix my mom's dryer when you knew I wouldn't be home tells me I was right, she said, her voice shaky. What do you expect me to say, Ness? Part of me feels like I should wrap my arms around you and hold you forever. Another part says I need to get in my car and drive all the way back to Miami just to get away from you. The rational side of my head tells me I can't do either, but that doesn't stop me from wanting to. I tried to explain. I know what you mean about mixed feelings, Vanessa said softly. I've waited 6 years for a chance to talk with you again. And now that you're here, I don't know what to say. The words sorry and I missed you seem so inadequate. Yet they're the only ones that come to mind, she admitted. Maybe it's best if we don't say anything, I suggested. We tried that for 6 years. Do you feel any better? She asked. I thought maybe I did, a little anyway. Then I saw her standing in the doorway, and all those damn memories came floating back. Not all of them were bad, though. We did have some good times, right? She asked me, tears streaming down her face. Most of them were good, and they're the ones that haunt me the most, I told her. I know we can never go back to the way things were, but do you think there's any way we could at least be friends again? I've missed you so much, Sam, she pleaded. I'm not sure that would be a good idea, Ness. Don't you think it would be better to try and forget about each other and work towards moving on with our lives? I asked. We've been friends since we were 8, Sam. How do you expect us to forget over 10 years worth of memories? She asked. I don't know, Ness. I don't have any answers, only questions. I've missed you too. I want to be friends again just as much as you do. But is that really fair for either one of us? We both know we want more from each other than just mere friendship, and right now that can't happen. And I'm not sure that it ever will, I said. Can't we at least try, Sam? We're not the same people we were 6 years ago. We've done a lot of growing up since then. Say that you'll give us a chance to get to know each other again. Please, she begged. All right, Ness, you win. We'll take the time to get to know each other again. But only if we start as friends first. That means no kissing, no hand-holding, and no saying, I love you. We will not be mutually exclusive, nor will we be spending all of our free time together. Since I'm afraid to be alone with you for long periods of time, whenever we go out, we'll be taking someone else with us as friends. We will not have any secrets about dating. If we begin seeing someone else, we tell each other about it. If we sleep with another person, we tell each other that too. I don't care how much it hurts. I am not going through what I did 6 years ago, I stated firmly. I can agree to all of your terms, but I won't promise not to get jealous if you begin dating someone else, she told me honestly. Neither one of us can control our feelings, Ness. Just keeping our actions in check will be difficult enough, I said. When I left Lauren's house that night, I didn't know whether to jump for joy or kick myself in the ass. Trust was a big issue with me, and Vanessa did more than merely break it. She shattered the damn thing. I had loved her once, and if truth be known, I still did. But could I ever learn to trust her again? I guess time would tell. Vanessa and I started getting together every few weekends. Most of the time, we would take William to either the zoo or the park. Sometimes we would go out to dinner, usually at McDonald's, and other times Vanessa would cook something for us at their place. Lauren would join us once in a while, but she had started dating some guy in town. She wouldn't tell us who it was, but she said that when the time was right, all would be revealed. I really enjoyed working at Titan Motors. The work was challenging, and I felt respected by most of my colleagues. The one problem was Paige. After we initially butted heads, she became impossible to read. One day, she would be sweet as sugar, complimenting me on my ideas and praising my work. The next day, she was a bear, saying that I needed to grow up and focus more on my future. I didn't know what her problem was, but needless to say, I wasn't overly thrilled when my boss decided to send both of us to California to meet with the governor. Due to their smog problem, the state government had become very interested in our advancements in energy emissions. Since I had developed most of these products and was a graduate of Miami State, it seemed only fitting that I be chosen to represent Titan Motors during these talks. If the governor was impressed enough with our pollution control devices, he might be persuaded to initiate provisions that would give government subsidies to anyone buying a new Titan vehicle. This deal represented billions of dollars for Titan Motors, and since I still received royalties off of every vehicle sold with my devices attached, I'd be making quite a chunk of change from it myself. I completely understood my involvement in this deal, but I questioned my boss as to why he thought it necessary to pair me with Paige. Sam, you're a smart guy, and I need you there to answer any technical questions the governor or his staff may have. But Paige is more outgoing, even flirtatious at times. Sending one of you without the other would be a mistake. The both of you working together might just land us this deal. I have already talked to Paige, and she has agreed to put aside any petty bickering so that the two of you can provide a united front in this matter, my boss said. My relationship with Vanessa had been slowly progressing to the point where we had talked through a great deal of our issues. We still weren't going out as a couple, but my anger over her cheating on me in high school had cooled considerably, and I no longer felt uncomfortable being around her. We discussed my trip and the fact that I would be traveling with Paige. Sam, I know we're not officially dating, and we both are free to see other people. But I told you that I would always be honest about my feelings, so here goes. I don't like the idea of you spending 3 days in some motel in California with another woman, she admitted. I'm not too crazy about the idea either, but this deal could mean big bucks for the company and maybe even financial security for me. I have to go, I told her. I know, but I still don't like it, she said. I told you that we can't always help how we feel, Just so long as we control what we do about it, I reminded her. Titan Motors spared no expense in putting us up in a very swanky hotel. We met with not only the governor but also the state senate and House representatives. In the end, the deal was a go. Paige was brilliant. I had never seen a woman work a room with such ease. She exuded style and elegance and had all the men she encountered practically eating out of her hand. The word sexy didn't even begin to describe it. I can't believe we pulled that off, Paige said to me as we sat across the table from one another, enjoying our victory nightcap. I know. You were brilliant back there, I told her. Ha! Most of that stuff was your idea, she reminded me. True, but you were damn good at selling it, I replied. We make a pretty good team, Sam. Why don't you order us up a bottle of this stuff, and we take this little celebration back upstairs? Your room or mine? She asked, flashing a sultry smile. Both, I said. Oh, how kinky. You want to christen each of our beds, then? She teased. No, Paige. What I meant was, you go to your room and I'll go to mine, I said firmly. What? Are you seeing someone else? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Not officially, I answered. What does that mean? She pressed. So, I gave Paige a brief overview of my relationship with Vanessa, leaving out why we initially broke up. So, you're not sleeping with her, and neither of you is mutually exclusive? She asked. That's right, I told her. Then what's the problem? She wanted to know. I don't date people I work with, I explained. As long as one of us isn't the other's boss, Titan Motors doesn't have any rules against it, she argued. It's a personal decision, I told her. Well, break it, Sam. We are good together. We both have the potential to take our careers all the way to the top. You have way too much talent to get tied down to a domestic and get roped into playing daddy to some woman's kid. Hell, it sounds like she's not even giving you any in the bedroom. A man needs more than that. Come upstairs with me, and I will make you forget all about Little Miss Homemaker, she whispered seductively. The scariest thing was, if I had a few more drinks in me, I probably would have taken Paige up on her offer. As it was, it took every ounce of my willpower to deny her charms. I could now understand more clearly how easy it was for Vanessa to have fallen prey to a guy like Logan. He was charming, persuasive, and knew how to push all the right buttons. Had I not lived through the pain of Vanessa's one-night stand, I probably would have set a new speed record for the fastest two people ever got from the bar in that hotel up to the bedroom. The managerial team at Titan Motors was thrilled with our success and unofficially deemed us the golden pair. I knew that this status would probably lead to more overnight travels with Paige in the future, as I was sure the company would want to capitalize on our methods of success. I got together with Vanessa a few days after I returned home, and she seemed rather nervous when I asked to talk with her in private. I told Vanessa about the success of our trip, and then, the part where Paige tried to seduce me. Did you sleep with her? Vanessa asked, her lip quivering with emotion. I admitted that I was tempted, and in the end, it was a struggle to resist. Paige was right in one aspect, though. I do need more than I have been getting from our relationship, I said. So, you want to break up with me and start dating her? She asked, as tears welled in her eyes. No, I want to start dating you, I told her with a grin on my face. You mean it? Vanessa asked as she threw her arms around me and cried. Yes, Vanessa, I do. I'm still not ready for us to have sex just yet, but I want to start going out as a couple. I want to hold you, caress you, and show the world that we belong to each other. This would mean that we are monogamous with each other. Can you handle being my girl exclusively? I asked. I have been your girl exclusively since you agreed on us being friends again. This does mean we can kiss now, right? She asked. Honey, you damn right it does, I said, pulling her into the first of many passionate embraces for the evening. The deal with California brought other populated states with pollution control problems to follow suit. Of course, in the wake of our previous success, the golden pair was always chosen to travel together to hash out these deals. In the office, Paige was fairly tame. On the road, however, she was practically a barracuda, trying anything imaginable to get me to succumb to her womanly ways. We got back from completing our third major deal, and once again I was able to resist sleeping with Paige, though just barely. I think I had become an obsession for her. She was certain that we would make the perfect power couple, and she was determined to convince me of it as well. My date with Vanessa that next Saturday night was somewhat of a mystery. She said she had a surprise for me, and I thought I had a vague idea of what it was. I must admit, I was not expecting what I found when I arrived at her mother's place to pick her up. Vanessa answered the door wearing a baby blue evening gown that was quite elegant and fit her frame perfectly. She looked gorgeous. "You look amazing, Vanessa. What's the occasion?" I asked, feeling a lump in my throat and another in my pants. "Why, it's our senior prom, silly. Your tux is in the bedroom, now go get cleaned up. We have reservations at the chateau for dinner in an hour, and the dance starts at 9, she told me with a mischievous smile. "What's going on, Vanessa?" I asked, looking at her curiously. "Honey, 7 years ago. Today should have been one of the happiest nights of our lives. Instead, it turned out to be a disaster. I want to try again. I have reservations for a nice meal, we can go out dancing later at one of the clubs, and if you feel up to it, I even rented the hotel room you booked 7 years ago, the one we never got to use," she told me, looking into my eyes. "Honey, no matter how much we want to, nobody can relive the past," I said. "I don't want to relive the past, Sam. I hate even thinking about that awful night. What I want is to give us a chance to live the evening we should have had, before your plane was canceled and my stupidity screwed it up. Please, Sam, honey, do this for me. Do this for us," she begged. I knew that Vanessa had spent a lot of time, effort, and most of all, money she couldn't really afford to make this night possible. So I was not about to disappoint her by refusing to go. Since I had already showered before I arrived, it didn't take long to change into my tux, and before I knew it, we were on our way. Vanessa had packed an overnight bag with some of the essentials we would need for our little excursion back in time. I took note that she had included a big box of condoms in our luggage. I had come to the conclusion months ago that I still truly loved Vanessa, and despite everything that happened, I always had. The last thing I wanted to do was disappoint her, but every time I considered making love to Vanessa, something was holding me back. For the life of me, though, I just couldn't place my finger on what the problem was. Because of the way we were dressed, Vanessa and I attracted quite a bit of attention that night. The places we visited were nice, but they weren't exactly tuxedo and prom dress nice. To save time, we just told whoever was bold enough to ask that we had just come from a wedding. Dinner was superb, although Vanessa and I argued about who was going to pay when the bill came. In the end, she won, but relented enough to let me leave the tip. I knew I would have to find some way to pay her back for this evening. I could afford something like this, but I knew she really could not. After leaving the restaurant, we ended up at a Miami hotspot called the Right Track. We were really having a great time, until I looked up and saw a group of women being seated at a large table next to ours. One of the ladies present looked all too familiar. It was none other than Paige Carter. Of course, being dressed as we were, there was no way she didn't notice us. "Hello, may I cut in?" Paige asked with a smug smile. "Not tonight, Paige," I said, rather annoyed. "I'm here with my girlfriend," I told her bluntly. "You look really nice, Sam. If you don't mind me asking, what's the occasion?" she asked, giving Vanessa a fake smile. "We just came from a friend's wedding," I said. "Oh, how romantic. I'll bet the two of you don't get to play dress-up too often," she said, directing her remark toward Vanessa. "Sam, aren't you going to be a gentleman and introduce us?" Paige asked, batting her eyelashes. I sighed, already regretting this entire encounter. "Paige Carter, this is my girlfriend, Vanessa Taylor." "Vanessa, this is Paige Carter. She works at Titan Motors with me," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Oh, Sam, don't be so modest. We do more than just work there, dear. At Titan, we're known as the Golden Pair. We travel all over the country together, just the two of us, wooing clients and bringing in those multi-million-dollar deals. Isn't that right, Sam, honey?" she purred. "You do all the wooing, Paige. I'm just the nerd they send to explain the technical stuff," I said, trying to keep my temper in check. Now, if you'll excuse us, Vanessa and I need to get back to our date, I said, trying to end this awkward conversation. Is she always that bad? Vanessa asked me while we were dancing. No, usually she's worse. She seems to have developed some sort of obsession with me, I said. She's a very beautiful woman, Vanessa noted. On the outside, I'll agree with you, but you just witnessed what she's really like on the inside. The more I'm around her, the less I want to be, I admitted. I excused myself to use the restroom, and when I came back, both Paige and Vanessa were in such a heated conversation that neither one of them noticed my return. You're just not in the same league as people like us, honey. Sam is not cut out to be a domestic. He is special, and you, my dear, are holding him back. If you care for him at all, break it off tonight and save yourself the anguish of losing him later, when he finally gets tired of playing daddy and wants a real woman in his bed. Paige sneered. I may not be able to compete with you in looks, and I have no doubt that you're great in the bedroom, as you obviously have had plenty of practice. But I wasn't shortchanged in life. God gave me a gift that you simply don't have, the ability to love. I love Sam. I would lay down my life for him. Those aren't just words. They are what I know in my heart to be true. I have no doubt whatsoever that Sam would do the same for me, or for my son. Until you have experienced that type of devotion, you will never truly understand what's really important in life. One day, during a weak moment, Sam may succumb to a person such as you. I know it can happen. If it does, yes, I would be devastated. But nothing would really change. A love like ours can't be destroyed because of a stupid mistake. So, lady, you can have your fancy college degree and your jet-set lifestyle. But when it comes to Sam, you'll have a fight on your hands. Because, quite frankly, you're the one who's not good enough for him, Vanessa said firmly. I couldn't believe the conversation I had just overheard. I knew Paige was relentless, but I never thought she would talk that way to Vanessa. At that moment, I finally understood. I reached for Vanessa's hand and squeezed it tightly. Are you ready to go, Ness? I asked, smiling. I believe our hotel room is waiting for us. Yes, Sam. I do believe I am. That's Sam and Vanessa's story. Love, betrayal, and second chances. Can broken trust ever be fully repaired? Comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.